law. How would you explain the meaning of due process of law? In what ways are procedural and substantive due process alike? How are they different? You may proceed.
The Due Process Clause of Amendment 14, adopted in 1868, can be defined as the essential protection of life, liberty, and property that each state must provide to each individual. According to Linda Monk in her book, The Words We Live By, the term due process of law has never been precisely defined. The roots of due process trace back to the Magna Carta, when King John promised not to exile, imprison, or destroy any free man or his rights except by the lawful judgment of his peers or by the law of the land. This was the first example of procedural due process. The phrase due process of law first appeared as a common law phrase in the 1354 version of the Magna Carta. No man of what estate or condition that he be shall be put out of land or tenement, nor taken, nor imprisoned, nor disinherited, nor put to death without being brought in answer by the due process of law. Due process can be found in two places in our Constitution, Amendment 5 and Amendment 14. It was first referenced in the Fifth Amendment, which originally was interpreted to limit the national government.
After the ratification of the 14th Amendment, the court was clear about interpreting the amendment in a way that would upset the balance of power between the national government and the states. Not all states interpreted the Bill of Rights to ensure due process. In Gillow v. New York, the court recognized freedom of speech to be a fundamental personal right, essential for liberty in our democratic Republican government. Gillow then began a process called selective incorporation, forcing the states to guard certain guarantees of the Bill of Rights through due process clause of the 14th Amendment. It imposes the requirement of due process on states while giving Congress the power to enforce the requirement through appropriate legislation. Due process can be categorized in two ways: substantive due process and procedural due process. Procedural due process forces the government to follow a certain fair procedure to ensure that the government is protecting the rights of individuals. The idea of procedural due process was first seen in the Magna Carta. Procedural due process is most often seen in criminal proceedings. Government must follow specific proceedings before taking the natural rights of individuals. Even though the phrase due process is only seen in the Fifth Amendment of the Bill of Rights, the concept of due process is seen in Amendments 4 to 6. The court has then incorporated different individual rights given to us in the Constitution. For example, in Mathis v. Ohio, the right to be protected against legal searches. In Gideon v. Wainwright, the right to receive counsel. Later on, the court also ordered law enforcement to inform the accused of their constitutional rights as seen in Miranda v. Arizona.
Substantive due process, on the other hand, is the protection not only against the government, but against any regulation. Not only is government required to use just and appropriate procedures when taking away fundamental rights, but it also guarantees that a person's fundamental rights cannot be taken away without appropriate governmental justification. Substantive due process deals mainly with the rights that are not specifically mentioned in the Constitution. Substantive due process examines the why of the law. Dred Scott v. Stanford was one of the first cases to use substantive due process through the Fifth Amendment. The court was able to use substantive due process to extend fundamental rights that every individual should enjoy. This was the case in Loving v. Virginia, in which Chief Justice Earl Warren stated, "The freedom to marry or not to marry a person of another race resides with the individual and cannot be infringed by the state." In Griswold v. Connecticut, the court established that a law must acknowledge the privacy of individuals. Specific actions by government cannot violate the privacy in martial relationships. In addition, in Robinson v. California, the court extended the rights of a person by prohibiting the imprisonment of an individual due to an illness. John Locke's philosophy claims that the purpose of government is to protect life, liberty, and property with the consent of people. The belief implies that the laws in our government are evolving. This allows us to have just or fair changes over time. Due process is both ancient and evolving concept. Thank you. We are now ready for your follow-up questions.
Thank you. So I'll start off to ask you, since you came in under the wire, we'll just fill up your time. What kinds of controversies either have arisen or might arise in determining whether certain rights are fundamental?
Some controversy that may have arisen,
Or may have arisen in the past, such as in Dred Scott, is he a citizen or not, or might arise in the future over determining whether certain rights are fundamental.
well, a case that could have, that could have not been sure about whether a right was
Yeah.
fundamental or not.
Yeah, a controversy.
Yeah, would have would be say.
Well, just to give you an example to play around with, okay? We've got a bunch of prisoners in Guantanamo, okay? And one of the questions is, do these prisoners have any rights that American citizens have? There are prisoners, we fought them in war, do they have a right to trial? You know, can you play with that one, okay? Are there issues of fundamental rights and due process that are involved in?
Some people believe that because of how heinous the crimes that these terrorists commit, they do not deserve these fundamental rights. This was a problem, and that's why Barack Obama addressed it, but he didn't really address it, as we see, he didn't do much. But this was one of the things that, yeah.
Okay, so that's a good example of a controversy. Can you think of any others?
Yeah, another example, like you said, was the Dred Scott,
Mhm.
because of the fact that due process is still being introduced. His rights of whether he was a citizen or not was a controversial issue, as well as for like women before they were amended into the Constitution as well.
To get to vote,
Yes.
right, and what kind of rights they have.
Yes.
Okay, good.
You talked about, and I love this phrase, that substantive due process examines the why of the law. That's really nicely put. Where do the substantive due process fundamental rights come from, and who gets to decide what they are?
Substantive due process, it's not clearly defined, just like due process, procedural due process, but substantive due process, the main purpose it has is to kind of give a message of why this law was implemented. So in cases where fundamental rights are being questioned, if they make a decision to give this person or this group fundamental rights that were questioned, then this is saying this is why we did it, because they too deserve them.
Okay, my question is, do you think that people who are charged with a crime, which is highly publicized in all the news media, can actually enjoy the full due process rights that they are entitled to under the Constitution?
Yes.
And give a specific example.
Yeah, they are entitled to the process because they go through a process to figuring out if they are actually like the person that committed the crime. And like an example would be like Travis Forbes, the guy that murdered the people, and how they had like to like go to through the process to get the right person. And
But what about the publicity part of it? Okay, television cameras are on. Everybody has an opinion, you know, Casey, whatever, I don't watch
Yeah,
television,
Casey-
so I'm out of it. but-
Casey Anthony, like in that case, it was like all across the nation. But that doesn't mean that the due process rights of Casey Anthony can be infringed,
Mhm.
because she's still in part of the adversary system, so she still has the right to defend herself and put her case out there, even though everybody's thinking, oh, she did it. She still has the right to do that under the adversary system through due process.
Let me follow up on my question. Years ago, when Lee Harvey Oswald was accused of killing the president, a man named Ruby came in and shot Oswald in front of millions of people all over the world watching this on television. Do you think that there would be the possibility of getting 12 people who were not watching television, didn't hear of the story, and had no opinion as to whether Ruby killed Oswald or not? Do you think that's possible? What I'm asking you is, doesn't all of this publicity taint the jury pool so that it's hard to find people who haven't already made up their mind before the trial?
Yes, because with the publicity and with our technology advancing, it's kind of hard for anybody really to not know what's going on, regardless like if you watch television or not. So like everybody's gonna have the background knowledge of what's going on, and they're gonna have an opinion.
Time.
Bud?
Did you have anything else you were going to say?
Oh,
They can still get a fair trial, you were about to say?
I had something to add, but
Go ahead.
like Supreme Court judges are not supposed to have any opinions, basically, but everybody knows that they do. Maybe they're more conservative or liberal, but they have to try to stray from those opinions, just like one who knows about the media would have to stray from those opinions. They would just have to, based on the evidence given to them, they would have to make a decision.
Okay, so the answer is, good judges can try to contain the complications of all this publicity and technology that Alexa voiced so well. Good. Good teamwork. Well, I was very impressed with your opening statements. One and all, Alexi did just a great job of compressing the history of the due process story. And Jose, you did a nice job of explaining selective incorporation, which is a tough one to explain, and giving good examples. Gideon versus Wainwright and Miranda. And this is the first time I've heard Dred Scott invoked to deal with the due process clause. And it's a very interesting case because most of the people who formed the Republican Party, including Abraham Lincoln, had to figure out a way not to obey what they considered the outcome of the decision there. And their answer was much like yours. Elect us and we'll get better judges there. So those are good opening statements, I thought, and then some very interesting answers, including the final teamwork of Alexa and Alan to deal with this PR question, which is a very, very important question now, coming up in cases that you can imagine and coming up in cases that have just been concluded. And I thought that the example of Ruby killing, could he get a fair trial? Would it require knowing nothing about it? You answered in a very interesting way.
So I was very impressed with your opening statement too. You clearly worked a lot on this and were very, very well prepared. It was a very sophisticated set of arguments, and you cited a lot of good case law, brought in a lot of stuff. I was a little harder answering questions. That's always the hardest part. And I could tell that you were feeling a little bit edgy and nervous about doing it, but you powered through. And so that's what's really important. You didn't have a what I guess we are now call a Rick Perry moment when your brain freezed and you couldn't say anything. You just all kept going, so that's really good.
I liked your opening statement, and I particularly liked your use of evidence. You had a lot of evidence from documents to philosophers to cases and to legal principles, and to a modern example, and that's very good. As to my question, I guess I had a bit of a answer in mind that I was hoping to hear, and yet your answer was persuasive and almost made me change my mind. And the thing is, after watching what's happened to the doctor accused of killing Michael Jackson, and the Casey Anthony story, and the Amanda Knox case that happened in Italy, all surrounded with publicity, that there was some doubt about whether or not all of the aspects of fundamental fairness in due process could occur. I think it's very dangerous to have that much publicity prior to a case and that and